Dodge this.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. On this edition of DTRH, I'm going to be going back in time to June 10th of 2012. It's back when I was doing my radio broadcast on a Sunday. And I used to do Sundays, and I think it was Wednesdays, if I remember. At the time, I was doing 2 days a week. And I had the chance to interview Jim Mars off air. I even back then, I was doing a lot of off-air interviews, and then I would edit them up. I'd known Jim a while, and it was the first time I was able to actually interview him live when I did the interview with him. And it was just an awesome experience. It was all around just cool for me because, I mean, I had already known him from emailing back and forth and talking with him about things. And I read his books, but it was cool because I got to know him as a person and we became friends. And I've interviewed him a few times since, but this was my very first interview with Jim. And unfortunately, Jim passed away recently. August 2nd, 2017, just a few weeks ago. I was going to reach out to him and get him back on because the last time I'd had him on, we only had a short period of time. And the day after we did the interview, he called me up and he said to me, Popeye, I need to come back on your show. We need to spend like 2 hours talking. I was like, all right, Jim, no problem. And I planned on having him back on, but it is what it is. So in honor of Jim, I've decided to take the first interview we ever did together about his book, Rise of the Fourth Reich. And we covered a bunch of other stuff. We chatted about Kennedy's assassination for a bit in there, too. But we covered Rise of the Fourth Reich. Great book. I urge you to buy it. And we get into detail about kind of like hidden history of World War II, which is what that book dives into a little bit. And this was just an all-around awesome interview with him. So to honor him, I figured what better of a way than to air the very first interview we did on my radio show together 5 years ago. So without wasting any more time, let's get to the main event, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, here's my interview from 5 years ago, June 10th, 2012, with Jim Mars. Rise of the Fourth Reich. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another live edition of DTRH. Thank you for joining me today. It is Sunday, the 10th of June, 2012. And today I have a special treat for you guys. I told you about 2 weeks ago that I was going to be interviewing Jim Mars coming up. And it was going to be a pre-recorded interview because of time constraints and stuff. So I recorded it about a week and a half ago during an afternoon. And I've had guests on and everything else. So this Sunday, today, I am going to play my interview with Jim for you guys because I don't want it to be too old, and because there's a few things that we talked about in relation to what's going on today. We discussed the rise of the Fourth Reich. By the way, for people that don't know, the Reich means empire. It's where the Third Reich, the Nazis, the Third Empire. And we discussed Jim's book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, and what's been going on since. But there's a few things that were
we talked about, like, Jim mentioned Ron Paul briefly during the interview, and then since the interview, we've had this whole thing with Rand and everything else come out. So I wanted to get the interview out as fast as I could in a timely manner. So today, you guys will get a chance to hear my interview with Jim Marrs. So I'm going to get it all set for you guys and ready to go. And without any further ado, here you go, Jim Marrs, Rise of the Fourth Reich. Your book, Rise of the Fourth Reich, is something that I think people need to see and read. It's not just because it's a good read, but there's a lot of hidden history in there that people don't know about.
Exactly.
There's a lot of different theories about Hitler escaping Nazi Germany and getting out of there, and not getting killed, or not killing himself, and not being discovered, the body, by the Russians. First, it was there was no body. Then they were buried. The bodies were buried in a shell crater and set on fire. A couple of years ago, the History Channel said that they verified that it wasn't Hitler's jaw over in Russia. So in your book, you explain the possible escape plan and how they got out of there. Let's start there, and then we can. I guess we can snowball into how this affects what's going on today, and how, like you said in your book, we beat the Germans, we didn't beat the Nazis.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think there is fairly compelling evidence that Hitler actually escaped the bunker, and this controversy is nothing new. In the months following the end of the war, Stalin told Roosevelt that Hitler got away. And then somehow the story changed. And then the Russians said, no, we've got his body. And, they've got this picture of this, looks like a dead Hitler, but then they've determined that that's not real. And then it just goes on and on and on. So you kind of have to look at the big picture. One of the things that I think really intrigues me is the story of Eva Braun's brother-in-law, Hermann Fegelein. Fegelein was a SS or a ranking officer, and was in the Fuhrer bunker there towards the end. And when Hitler told everybody else, he said, well, it's all over now. He said, get out. And said, save yourselves. Okay, so he told everybody to get out. Well, Fegelein leaves, and while he's out there, he's running around. He meets with an actress named Christina Ryman, and she met with him on April the 27th. And she has since said that he was very worried. He had several drinks, and he kept repeating that there were two Hitlers in Berlin. And just before they parted, he said, boy, if Hitler ever discovered that he knew this secret, that he'd kill him. Well, Fegelein goes back to the bunker, and an SS party grabs him, and they bring him in. They charge him with desertion. And he said, yeah, but he told everybody to leave, and they took him up and shot him. And that was the end of that. So, it couldn't have been for desertion, because Hitler was already telling everybody to get out. So why did they shoot him? Because I think he knew there were two Hitlers. And that brings us to the scenario of how Hitler got away. Of course, nobody goes to the trouble of studying all the details. They just listen to the headlines and sound bites. But if you'll study the Fuhrer bunker, there was a back way out of his private apartment. And I think it's perfectly possible that they brought in a Hitler lookalike, either dead or alive, and brought him in there. And then Hitler goes out and tells everybody goodbye, and goes around and says goodbye to everybody, and then tells his right-hand man, Martin Bormann, who was in charge of the whole thing, his chief of staff, he said, if you hear a shot, don't come in for 10 or 15 minutes. What? So anyway, sure enough, they hear a shot, and they wait the prescribed time, and then only Martin Bormann goes in. And then they bring in his driver and several other people, and they see two bodies wrapped in a rug, and they help carry them out, carry them up to the stairs, put them in this little shallow grave, cover them with gasoline, set them on fire. Now, that's been the whole story. And these people, the driver and others have survived the war and told the story. And I think they're telling the truth to the extent of what they knew. But by their own stories, they never actually saw Hitler dead. They heard a shot, and they went in, they helped carry bodies out, but the bodies were wrapped in rugs. They didn't know who they were. And I think it's entirely possible that Hitler got out the back entrance of the Fuhrer bunker and then made his way to a waiting seaplane on the river and got away. And, of course, this has led, there's been stories, rumors, fake photographs, phony lead stuff going on and on for years after the war. But whether he escaped or not, that's an intriguing aspect of World War II and probably will be argued from now on. But whether or not he escaped doesn't really matter, because what does matter is that Morton Bormann, in August of 1944, after the D-Day landings were proven to be successful, and in other words, there's no way they're going to push the Allies off the continent. So he met with the head of IG Farbenkommand and the head of the German Central Bank, and they instituted Operation Eagle Flight, Adlerflucht, okay? And this was to get all of the ranking Nazis and all their scientists and all of their secret weaponry and their secret chemistry and chemical and biochemical and everything else, all their secrets out of Germany and spread somewhere else. And this is when the whole thing started to assure the Third Reich.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to cut it off there. And coming back in from break, I will pick it up right where I left off with Jim Mars. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Weaponry and their secret chemistry and chemical and biochemical and everything else, all their secrets out of Germany and spread somewhere else. And this is when the whole thing started to assure that the Third Reich survived. And so from then on, it was the Russians pushing in from the east and the Allies pushing in from the west. And when finally the surrender came at that Reims courthouse in May of 45, you might note that it was the German army, the military, that surrendered. They got whipped. But the Nazis were not even represented there. The National Socialist Party, they'd all beat feet. And they'd gone to Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, Egypt, and more than thousands of them came to the United States, thanks to the helps of the very same people who helped put Hitler in power. And that would have been John J. McCloy, who in the 30s was the CEO of National City Bank in New York, which was the largest lender of money to the Nazi government. He sat in Hitler's box at the 1936 Olympics. And then, after the war, John J. McCloy became the High Commissioner of Germany. And he's the one that sent all the Nazis over here. And then, once they got over here, their backgrounds were whitewashed by McCloy's protege, Allen Dulles, who had become head of the new CIA. And his brother, John Foster Dulles, was Secretary of State. And both Dulles brothers had been lawyers for the Kurt Schroeder Bank, which was, again, one of the largest financial supporters of Hitler and the Nazis. It's absolutely incredible. And these same people who had funded Hitler, tied to Wall Street, tied to the international banking community, were then still in charge after the war and helped bring all these unreconstructed Nazis over to the United States under Project Paperclip and similar type programs. And of course, we all know that we got their rocket scientists. You know, that I remember there was a joke when I was a kid back in the 50s. And it's the Russian and the American arguing with each other, saying our Nazi scientists are better than your Nazi scientists, you know. And that, of course, was in reference to the space race, where the Russians were building these heavy lift rockets that could put big payloads up into space, and that's why they were the first to get a satellite in orbit. They were first to get a dog in orbit, first to get a man in orbit, first to get a woman in orbit. And we were starting to feel pretty bad, and so that's why we had to put a crush program on, make sure we got somebody on the moon by the end of the 60s. And because we were building rockets with that had more sophisticated guidance systems and computer-run things. Now, what I point out in my book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, is it seems likely, considering that at the top of this power pyramid with these same international bankers and financiers that had created Hitler, and then when he got defeated in the war, they just kept going and brought Nazis over here and kept the tenets of National Socialism alive. So they controlled both people in Russia because they had helped finance the Russian Revolution. Wall Street bankers, the City of London financiers had backed the communists, the Bolsheviks at the time of World War I, and had created communism. So they were controlling both sides. So it's entirely possible, and in fact probable, that there was a third secret space race. The Russians are building the heavy lift rockets. We were building the sophisticated guidance systems, and somewhere they were putting the two together to create a really effective space fleet. And there's even rumors today that, in fact, Gary McKinnon, who they've been trying to extradite here for hacking into the Pentagon computers, the thing he says he found because he was looking for evidence of UFOs. He was just a UFO fan and was hoping to find evidence that the military knew something more about them than they were telling us, which of course they do. But what he found was the names and ranks and offices and listing of what he says is our space fleet. He says we have a space fleet out there that is covert, that nobody's being told about. So that's just one aspect of the of World War II that has come forward and is impacting upon us today. The other thing, as you know, was where I revealed the evidence that it was the Nazis who actually developed the atomic bomb first. And
I was about to ask you about that because this is something that I've mentioned to my listeners, and I've had people challenge me on this and say, no way, you're crazy. We did all these atomic bomb tests. And I'm like, okay.
Well, this is an amazing piece of history. But early in 1945, President Roosevelt was informed that our Manhattan Project to develop an atomic bomb was slowly but surely plunging ahead, but that because they were using centrifuges to enrich the uranium, it was a slow and tedious process, and they did not have enough uranium but for maybe one atomic bomb. And of course, they were going to have to test this thing. You can't say you don't want to go use something when you haven't even tested it, don't even know for sure if it's going to work. And so that was where we were in early 1945. And then we have the incidents of the U-234, a giant transport submarine that was built by the Nazis. And it crosses the Atlantic. It was spotted by air defenses, but yet nothing was done to it. And it finally surfaces and surrenders right there towards the end of the war. And it showed that on board was two Me-262 jet fighters, the new jet fighters that they had developed, along with 50 gold-line casks of uranium. And here's the clincher. Dr. Heinz Schlichter, who was the inventor and developer of a very rapid response detonator type thing, then that's where we were having trouble. You had to have a very instantaneous type detonator to make an atomic bomb work, and we were still working on that, and here's the guy who had one. And they all suddenly become property of the United States. And Of course, they've tried to cover that up. They tried to say that the uranium was not enriched, and yet if it was not enriched, why do you need gold-lined cask? Because you only need something gold-lined to prevent radiation leak, which means it's been enriched into radioactive state. So the next thing you know, we test the one uranium bomb that we had developed under Manhattan Project at Alamogordo, New Mexico. And I might point out that more than half the scientists involved at that time sincerely believed that if we triggered off an atomic reaction, that we might not be able to stop it. It would ignite the atmosphere of the Earth and set the entire world aflame.
I'm going to pause it right there, ladies and gentlemen, because we have a break coming up. But you've heard myself and other hosts, including Radchick here, talk about that very thing that Jim just said. They thought they were going to ignite the atmosphere on fire, and they did it anyway. We'll be right back. That's the level of psychosis we're dealing with.
Action that we might not be able to stop it. It would ignite the atmosphere of the Earth and set the entire world aflame and destroy the Earth. But they went ahead and set it off anyway, just because to test it. And luckily, their fear was unfounded. It did stop, but it created, of course, one hell of a bomb. All right, so they tested it, and sure enough, it worked. That very same day, the USS Indianapolis set sails, and it leaves and heads for Tinian, which was the Pacific Island base where they were going to launch their atomic bomb attack on Japan. It arrives, and a week or so later, we drop 2 bombs uranium bombs on Japan, one on Hiroshima, and then about a week later on Nagasaki. Now, where did we get all that uranium? We got it from the Nazis, okay? And now, what was the deal? Why would they give us this? And Hitler kept calling for super weapons, and why didn't the Nazis use their atomic bomb at the end of the war? Well, 2 reasons, okay? Number one, they had the bomb, but they did not have a efficient and delivery system. They didn't have one that would assure them of hitting the right target. They had the A-10 3-stage rocket, which they named the New York rocket, if that would give you some indication of what they planned. In fact, I have a copy of a 1942 Luftwaffe study of the atomic bomb blast on Manhattan Island. Okay, so the A-10 could probably have carried a bomb to New York, but they didn't have the guidance systems worked out. The old V-1 bombs and even the V-2s, the way they dropped those on London was to simply gauge the amount of fuel necessary, and then they'd launch those missiles, and when they got over London, they'd run out of fuel, and they'd drop like a bomb. That was their great guidance system. So they needed something a little more sophisticated than that. Now, they also were building huge 6-engine bombers up in Norway, and in fact, they clung to this Luftwaffe base up there till the very end of the war, and long after there was any strategic value in holding this base in Norway. And the reason was they were trying to get it prepared so they could launch this strike on New York. And in fact, one of these giant Junkers bombers actually flew across the Atlantic and got to within 25 miles, photographed the New York skyline, and turned around and flew back. So they knew this was feasible, but again, the airfield wasn't completely finished. These bombers weren't completely finished, and yet the Russians were closing in, the Allies were closing in. So this was not a reliable delivery system. And the second thing, and I think the main thing, is that by this time, the war was pretty much over by the late spring of 1945. And the Russians are already moving into Berlin, and the Allies are close behind. And if the Nazis had used an atomic weapon on London, Paris, or New York, would that have ended the war? Would we have sued for peace? I don't think so. I think that would have incensed everyone, and they would have made sure that Germany was obliterated. They would have left no stone standing. And I think the Nazis realized this, so they went to the people who are actually trying to run the world, the international financiers, the globalists as they call themselves, and they made a deal. They swapped their nuclear technology to the United States in exchange for immunity. And that's how they got them all, thousands of them out of Germany and over here. And although there was a few isolated instances of finding occasional war criminals, such as Eichmann, who was captured in South America and then taken over to Israel for trial. But he was tertiary level. He was not the highest ranking guy they got. And the rest of them got away. Martin Bormann got away. I am convinced of that because there was a New York Times reporter named Paul Manning who wrote a really great book called Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile. And he laid out all of the information and facts showing that Bormann survived the war, and in fact had scheduled an interview with Bormann down in South America in the late 60s or early 70s. And because Bormann was actually quite proud of the fact that he had, extended the life of the Reich, and that he had this worldwide financial empire put into place. And so he was more than happy to take credit and reveal this to the world. But it didn't happen because Heinrich Müller, who had been head of the Nazi Gestapo and was in charge of security for the Nazis after the war and their rat lines, he squelched the interview, said no interview. And so that didn't come out. But that's how close this Paul Manning got. And so I am convinced that, and then there was also talk that Hitler and Eva Braun had been down in South America with Bormann. So there's just a lot that we don't know, a lot that we think is history because it's taught to us in school, and we're brought up to have, unquestioning faith in our teachers and in our school systems and in our encyclopedias and in all authority figures. And it's just now that in recent years that we're finding out that it doesn't always work that way. And I think that little bubble began to burst with the Kennedy assassination, because there were really a lot of people from that very day that were going, wait a minute. One lone nut shoots the president, and then another lone nut gets in the basement of the police station and shoots the first lone nut. Wait a minute, something funny's going on here. But of course, officialdom has always said, no. In fact, today, even though the polls show that perhaps 85 to 90% of the public now believes Kennedy was killed as a result of a conspiracy, you still have the major media and major political figures who are still holding the line and saying, no. That didn't happen. There's no conspiracy. So, I don't know. If there's one good thing to come out of the attacks of 9/11, I think it might have been that the term conspiracy got rehabilitated, because 9/11 obviously was a conspiracy. Now the question is, was it the pat conspiracy that the official story would have us believe, that these 19 fanatical Arab Muslims, some who really had no real flying skills, and no real and no governmental or national support anywhere, but they still managed to overcome a $40 billion defense system and hijack 4 planes simultaneously, turning off their transponders all at about the same time, and then fly these craft across country, sometimes up to an hour and a half, with no interceptors intercepting them, and then unerringly fly them into the World Trade Center and reportedly into the Pentagon, and all this under the direction of a Muslim cleric using a laptop computer in a cave in Afghanistan. I mean, that's the most ridiculous conspiracy theory I've ever heard. And yet that's what they have foisted off on the American people. And the American people, by and large, have accepted it because, number one, it came from authority figures. Oh, the government said this. Ooh, and the news media said this. And the network news said this. And secondly, they've accepted it because to do otherwise might cause them to be uncomfortable and realize that they're being lied to and that their government is filled with people that, shall we say, have questionable agendas.
Well, when you look at 9/11, and you look at like the base playbook of it, you can go back and it's like you look at the JFK assassination, the Oklahoma City bombing, the first bombing in '93 of the World Trade Center, all of these events and others too. It's like they follow the same basic playbook, Jim, and they really are unoriginal. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will pause it right there. Going into the final break of the first hour. We'll be back in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. More with Jim Mars when we get back. It's like they follow the same basic playbook, Jim, and they really are unoriginal.
Well, hey, if something works, why stop?
That's true. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
That's right. That's right. If it worked the first time, it'll work the next time. It's really sad, but and I saw that too, the very day of 9/11, because I'll tell you my little story. Of course, I got up and my wife called and said, "Turn on the TV. We're under attack." And I turned on the TV, and the first tower had been struck. And I'm sitting there watching when the second tower gets hit, and then everything else that followed. Well, I was about an hour later. I was like everybody else, glued to the TV, but I had a problem because my old pickup truck, the inspection sticker was out, and I really had to get it renewed. And so I got in the truck, and headed off, and was listening to National Public Radio. And only about an hour, no more than an hour and a half, after the events that actually happened, I'm hearing on NPR a guy from the Council on Foreign Relations, and to my everlasting regret, I didn't catch who it was, but I did hear that he was with the Council on Foreign Relations, so I started paying close attention. And he was saying, well, this is terrible, but this is a new kind of warfare. This is international terrorism, and it goes beyond national boundaries. And so this is a whole new deal, and we're going to have to bind all the nations together and work together collectively to, probably through the United Nations, to combat this new form of terrorism. And I'm going, So I get home, I get my inspection sticker, and then go back home, and I turn the TV back on. And now it's only about no more than 2.5 hours after the actual events. And here's Henry Kissinger, Wesley Clark, Alexander Haig, all of these ranking Council on Foreign Relations members on various channels. And it's like they're reading from the same script. They're going, this is terrible. But this is a new type of warfare, and we've got to bind all the nations together so that we can combine this, and we're going to have to give up some liberty so that we can. And I'm, what? And it's like, wait a minute, how did they even know what happened? Of course, they're already announcing that Osama bin Laden was behind it all, although, according to the official story, they had no idea that this was going to happen. They had no idea who these hijackers were. They totally missed them, and they all got totally disintegrated when the planes blew up, the buildings blew up. How did they know Osama bin Laden did this an hour later, just like Oswald, right? So yes, it's the same MOs, but like I said, if you got a winning methodology, why change?
I guess they go by the the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I mean, really,
I think they go by the old adage that you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but but if you got control over the media, you can kind of fool all the people all the time.
Well, yeah, very true. With the control over the media, that's another thing. And this all goes back to your book, Jim, because people need to realize that this technology and stuff that was brought over, this uber secret technology, a lot of it involved mind control technology, which is what NASA is heavily involved in. I've found out through my research into MK Ultra and like Project Monarch and things like that. And a lot of this technology stemmed from the Nazis' work into mind control and things like that. And look what it spawned today. They use it through television and mass media. And you're right. Just like with the Council on Foreign Relations guys and Kissinger and all them on 9/11, it's the same thing now. As soon as you see something happen, it's the same bunch of morons out there. Every time they want to bomb another foreign country, it's the three amigos. They roll out Lieberman and the other two morons. And they put them out there, and it's the same three guys, McCain, Lieberman, and the other one. And they go on all the mornings. They usually start on Sunday mornings, I've noticed, Jim. And they start doing the Sunday morning shows, and it's, we have to help the rebels. We have to give them guns. And I find that usually by that time, when they're saying that we have to, they're already giving them the weapons.
They're already doing it. Yeah, they're just kind of rationalizing what they're already doing. Yeah, right. And then if you wait long enough and really watch the news carefully and read between the lines, you find out that those rebels were probably created and funded by us in the first place. I mean, it's the old problem, reaction, solution thing. They create the problem, offer a radical solution, and then when people start hollering, they back off a little bit and reach a compromise, but it still advances their agenda. That's just the way they work. That's it. And it works all the time. It just keeps working. It's absolutely amazing. And but you say you were in the military, and then so that when you go in the military, that's a psyop. Okay, it's a psychological operation. They shave off your hair, they strip you down, put you in the same green uniform next to the guy next to you, and they basically try to destroy you as a individual. You then become part of the group, and as the group, you train, you eat, you breathe, you sleep, you march, you drill, and you yell, kill, kill, all together, so that you become a good functioning soldier who will obey orders, regardless of where they come from and how ridiculous they may be. Well, if you'll stop and think about it, I think we were all the victims of a psychological operation on 9/11. To change somebody, to get control over their head, the easiest way to do that is to first traumatize them. All right. And it's pretty traumatic going in the military for young guys that just out of school and, they're happy, carefree, and then they go in there and all of a sudden their head's shaved and they're all in line and a drill sergeant screaming at them and, and they drags them down and then tries to build them back to be a good soldier. Well, same thing happened to us as a country. We were traumatized by 9/11, and in the months that followed, while we were trying to shake off this trauma, then we were put back together by the media, obeying the whims of the government, which was to create the war on terrorism, which means, hey, yeah, we're going to stick our hand down your pants here in broad daylight, but don't worry about it. It's for your own security. And I think that's why a lot of people just didn't put up a fight right at the very beginning, because they were all so numbed down by the shock factor of 9/11, which makes it all the more important to find out what truly happened on 9/11 and who was truly behind it. And I don't think that's a unpatriotic thing to say, because George W. Bush, I recall the evening of 9/11, himself said that we must not rest until we find out who's responsible for this and see that they're punished. Hey, and I totally agree with him. Problem is, we haven't found out who's truly behind it. And if you think I'm just spouting some conspiracy theory, let me simply point you to the words of John Farmer, a former New Jersey Attorney General who was appointed and named as the senior counsel to the official 9/11 Commission. This is a commission that belatedly, 2 years after the fact, was finally put together by President Bush to try to evaluate and find out what happened on 9/11. And here's what John Farmer has to say. In the course of our investigation into the national response to the attacks, the 9/11 Commission staff discovered that the official version of what had occurred that morning, that is, what government military officials had told the Congress, the Commission, the media, and the public about who knew what and when, was almost entirely and inexplicably untrue. Untrue. So the chief lawyer of the 9/11 Commission says the story they gave us is almost entirely untrue. So, wait a minute. What's the problem then in you, me, and others trying to find out what the truth is?
Well, they don't want us to know the truth. Remember, the family members, Jim, had to fight. They had to fight to even get an investigation. And I remember this because I lived right outside of New York, in Jersey at the time, and I helped out that day, and even days afterwards, I worked with the Red Cross to package stuff up and bring it down to Ground Zero, supplies, boots, stuff like that. And I got a different understanding of things, I guess, than most people because, you know, when you're in the local area closer to a disaster, you see things that the mainstream media won't cover. So, of course, in California, you're not going to know what's going on. And there was a lot of shady stuff right off the bat.
Same thing happened, by the way, with Kennedy assassination in Dallas. And since I was in Dallas at the time and in the area, I heard things, saw things, and learned things that were never reported in the national media.
I heard.
Go ahead. What did you learn about 9/11?
I heard them arrest a van load of Israelis
right
on the other side of the George Washington Bridge. I heard it right in the command center radios from the State Police Command Center at what used to be Giant Stadium. And I've had people dispute it, and then I'm like, go look it up. You'll see they actually did arrest a couple of 3 van loads of them.
Yep.
You know, like 2 in Jersey and 1 over in New York. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to pause it right there, and I will pick it up coming in to the beginning of hour number 2, right where I left off. Stay tuned. More when we come back with my interview with Jim Mars. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on today's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. I want to thank you all for tuning in and listening. And before I get back into my interview with Jim Mars, I want to thank everybody who took the time to email me about Friday's broadcast with Richard Weaver and all the people who spread the video out. The number right now is stuck on YouTube on the archive around 600. It's been stuck there all day, so I'm sure eventually it'll pop up. Yesterday it was stuck at 300, and then it popped up to where it is now early in the morning, and then it hasn't moved since. But I know the article on Federal Jack itself, and I posted it yesterday morning with embedding the video and the audio archive, you know, the YouTube archive of Friday Night Show, and it had over 1,000 hits yesterday. So I know YouTube blocks video counts, but it's nice to see that people are actually, you know, stepping up to the plate and helping Richard out. And I want to just thank everybody that's emailed me so far and showed interest in helping Richard. And I haven't gotten back to everybody yet, but I will be getting back to everybody within the next few days. And I'll be forwarding everybody's stuff to Richard so he can look through it. I have to, you know, contact him and go over a few things with him. And again, this is all at his request. He asked me to play middleman because, you know, he's going through a lot and he trusts me and he feels comfortable with me. So he asked me if I would kind of vet everybody. So I'm not doing this because I want to get my name involved or whatever. I'm actually doing it at the request of Richard himself. So I just want to thank everybody that took the time to send me emails. I mean, they were just filled with words of love for this guy. And it's really, it fills me with hope that there's actually people that give a crap out there. So it's nice. I just want to thank everybody. As a vet, as a retired sailor myself, I just want to thank everybody. That was a rough story to sit and listen to. And I know a lot of guys messaged me later on that night, and they were pretty choked up about what they heard. So I just want to thank everybody. All right, I'm going to get back into it with Jim Mars. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Giant Stadium. And I've had people dispute it, and then I'm like, go look it up. You'll see they actually did arrest three van loads of them.
Yep.
Two in Jersey and one over in New York. One of them had a mural of a truck. It was a big box truck with a mural of a plane flying into the World Trade Center and blowing up. And it was all owned by this company named Urban Moving Systems, which shortly thereafter moved back to Israel. In fact, when the FBI went to go investigate them, the FBI agents showed up. These guys were literally packing their crap in their boxes, Jim. And the FBI agents were told to let them go. And nobody thought that a little odd?
Well, and to add to that, the summer of 2002, the story finally broke about the art student scandal, which was they threw 200 Israelis out of the United States for being part of this art student spy ring, okay, that had been spying on various things. But the clincher is that a bunch of these art student spies had been at the same bases and the same hotels and restaurants as the 9/11 hijackers. Okay, so they were following them around or controlling them or tailing them or observing them. Who knows? Because that was very little reported on in the news. And of course, surely I'll have to pose the question of, what kind of media hubbub would there have been if these had been Iranians or Iraqis or Afghans? But no, they were Israeli spies, and all we did was pack them back home once we found out about their activities. There's just something not right about all that.
There's a huge portion of people that even will just say that didn't happen, Jim. That's outright outlandish.
Well, do your homework. Do your homework, because it did happen. You know it happened. I know it happened. By the way, if you doubt any of this stuff, let me suggest that you read my book, The Terror Conspiracy Revisited, and be sure and get the Revisited. That's an updated version. The Terror Conspiracy Revisited will tell you everything you need to know about 9/11, including the fact that one thing we think we know is that, these hijackers use little box cutters to overcome the flight crews. No, it didn't happen. Well, how can I say that? We all know that happened. How do we know that happened? Well, because of the phone calls to Barbara Olson, as reported by her husband, Ted Olson, who had been appointed Solicitor General of the United States by George W. Bush. Okay? Well, okay. But she made phone calls, right? And, he said he got a call from her cell phone. But then later found out you couldn't make a cell phone call from an airplane at that time. So the story changed. It became, it was the backseat airphone. Except the problem was the aircraft Barbara Olson was on didn't have backseat airphones. So we got more problems. And then comes the Zachariah, Missouri trial in 2006, where the FBI came in and gave all their evidence about 9/11, including the transcripts and records of the telephone calls on the morning of 9/11. And they said Barbara Olson had tried one call, but it was unconnected. In other words, Barbara Olson didn't talk to anybody. There was no completed call from Barbara Olson. So everything we think we know about the hijacking on 9/11 turns out came from a non-existent phone call.
Yeah, I've seen the evidence that those phone calls were faked. I mean, you couldn't. Half of those phone calls that they say were made from cell phones, they couldn't have been made from the height that that they said they were made at. And then the ones that were made on quote unquote airphones, some of the planes didn't even have airphones equipped in them. They weren't models that even had airphones on them. And when you bring up Olson, that's a real. See that one set of phone calls. Just from the Barbara Olson call where she supposedly calls her husband. And first he said it was from a cell phone. Then he said it was from an airphone. Like, he kept changing his story, and nobody's ever questioned that. That's you know, if you or I pulled the crime off, right, Jim, and we kept changing our story to the police, don't you think that they would be like, something shady?
We'd still be in the basement with the light shining in our face.
Exactly.
Shouting questions at us. No. But see, there was never any real investigation because they didn't want investigation because it's all a phony deal. Just as phony as the war on terrorism. Are there Muslim fanatics in the Middle East who would like to come and do harm to the United States? Yes, there are. But that's only a handful of radicals, okay? And if left to their own devices, they probably couldn't scrape up enough wherewithal between them all to hire a camel to get to an airport and buy a ticket to get here, okay? No. An event like 9/11, that was something done by a national government.
Wait, Jim, you mean to tell me that some guy, some 6'6" Arab on dialysis in a cave with a laptop and a satellite phone didn't pull off 9/11?
Of course not.
Of course I'm being...
By the way, I have a pilot friend of mine who's good friends with one of those pilots, and I'm having a problem remembering the name right now, Blasingame or something like that. You might remember it.
Oh, Charles Burlingame.
Yeah, Charles Burlingame. And he said he was the biggest, roughest fighter pilot, combat pilot. He said there's no way that he would have let anybody into the cockpit, and if somehow they managed to get in, he would have torn them apart. There's no way he was going to just give up that ship. No. And, of course, that leads back to Pilots for 9/11 Truth.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will pause it right there. And again, I will pick it up coming right out of the break. You heard Jim mention Pilots for 9/11 Truth. You've heard me mention them on air before. Go check them out, Pilots for 9/11 Truth. Some of the evidence they bring to the table is interesting to say the least. All right, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Who got hold of the statistics and the data for that particular flight, and it showed that during the whole flight, the door to the cockpit was never opened. So in other words, nobody got in there. So wait a minute. So who hijacked the plane? How did they get the plane to? Okay. This again is in my book. In fact, it was in my book back in 2002 when it got censored and blocked and suppressed. And it was in my book in 2006, and now it's in the Terror Conspiracy Revisited, which is that in the summer of 2001, a Boeing 737 flew from California, Edwards Air Force Base, all the way to Australia, and then flew 11 or 12 missions, and then flew back to Edwards and landed safely, all the while with nobody on board. It was all guided by Global Hawk technology, the technology to run an airplane via computer from a ground location. So they had that technology in 2001. And then if you have, and then the big Boeing jets were already equipped. In fact, I had a Boeing pilot of a Boeing craft tell me in the 1980s, I was doing a publicity thing for him, and he said, well, my job's just redundant. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, the computer flies the airplane. I'm just there in case the computer breaks. All right? That was in the 80s. So now you've got all these big wide-body jets that are flown by computer. Well, if you know anything, you know that you can capture a computer by overriding the electromagnetic signals, kind of like stepping on the CB radio. All right, if your signal's stronger, then the CB picks that up, and they're going to hear you and not who you were originally talking to. Same principle. they can take it over. And I tried to tell people back in 2001 that would explain how they were able to turn off the transponders all at the same time. You can't do it. You'd have to go find the transponders. You have to hunt all over the aircraft. You have to climb down into places, climb up into spaces. You have to, to get to those transponders to turn them off, and yet they all went off about the same time. That's because somebody got to the computer and switched it off. And back then, when I tried to tell people this, oh, you're just crazy. Well, that's Buck Rogers. That's just a theory, blah, blah, blah. Today, you go to the picture show, and you see ads for the U.S. Air Force, and they're saying, hey, come fly our Global Hawk, pilotless aircraft. You can sit at the computer there in Arizona, and you can bomb a village in Afghanistan. And so now it's accepted. Everybody knows we have this technology, but nobody seems to go back and say, wow, maybe they used that technology on 9/11 to capture those airplanes and fly them where they wanted them to.
I agree. And a lot of people, there's a lot of different theories that they're, I've talked to different people about all the different, the planes actually didn't crash. And then people have said, well, if planes didn't, if they weren't civilian jets, or if they didn't use jets at all, then what did they do with the planes? Well, if they turned the transponders off, they could have landed them anywhere.
Right, which, by the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but at least two of those planes, 5-6 years later, were still listed under those airlines as being in operation. And so, all you got to think is just repaint tail numbers, okay? that's how easy that would be.
Nobody would be the wiser. Look at Operation Northwoods. This is, a lot of 9/11, or at least a portion of it, Jim, to me, for after studying Northwoods, it's almost like they used portions of Northwoods, like they picked out certain pieces they wanted to use from it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they said, hey, that was a good plan, and it would have worked then. Let's just update it a little bit, and it'll work now. Is that amazing? So what we don't know can hurt us.
I agree. That's why it's important to research this stuff. I get people all the time that question and say, well, why is it important to know the details of 9/11? I don't need to know all the details. I just know that they did it. No, you do need to know the details, because that way you can understand the level of involvement, and you can understand the bigger picture. Because if you understand the details, each detail leads you down another path, and eventually all those paths merge. But I think in order to get an accurate picture of what's going on, people do need to understand all this. It doesn't matter how much time it takes. I think, it's either we research this and do something about it, or we end up in a prison camp.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it, if not worse, because when you look around and you see what's happening today with the adulteration of the food and the water and the growth of obesity, what is it, 3/4 of the population's obese because they're eating crap food, and the water's bad. They got fluoride in it, for God's sakes, which just numbs you down, okay? And then we got the chemtrails where they're spraying stuff into the atmosphere, and we're having to suck it all in. I mean, and it's causing weather changes. The weather's odd, erratic. I hesitate to say global warming, because there is global warming, by the way, but that's been used to try to push carbon taxes and try to make us feel guilty, and because but it's not us. Whatever's happening is solar system wide, because the ice caps on Mars are diminishing.
Thank you for being someone with some sensibility and saying it. I say all the time, when people are like, you can't deny the Earth's getting warmer. Well, there are certain spots, that yes, and things going on that prove the Earth is getting warmer. But let's not, let's not think that man is responsible for everything. After all, there is this huge ball of fire in the sky that likes to throw up and eject huge masses of solar radiation at us.
That's right. And by the way, I heard, and this is undoubtedly true, all of the conservation efforts that we've done over the past 100 years, and actually it's only been underway probably in the past 50, 60 years, all of that was done away, was lost when Mount St. Helens blew. That threw up enough carbon into the atmosphere that it just wiped out any advances we'd made. So, it's not us. But if you go sell your SUV, that ain't going to do squat.
It's like when the nuts out there, the eco nuts, I like to call them, they wanted to put a couple years ago, remember the EPA wanted to put bags on cows to collect cow farts.
Yeah, right. Collect manure so we wouldn't have a methane problem.
And now,
this is, hey, talking about the EPA, here's how insane it is. EPA has now declared carbon dioxide is a hazardous gas. Okay, this is something I guess they're going to try to control. Well, wait a minute. Every time we exhale, we're exhaling carbon dioxide. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, well, that's their way of saying that you're a danger to the planet, and we need to exterminate you.
That's right. We probably need to hold you in a camp somewhere.
That's basically what that is. They make hay illegal. It's insane. They have they backed off with it? Like, are they trying to attack the small farmers down there in Texas? Though I know they've been.
Oh yeah, they're running them out of business everywhere. You can't sell your raw milk, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's insane what they're doing. And of course the United Nations things through this alimentarius,
Codex Alimentarius.
Codex.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break. We will be back in 3 minutes. Do not go anywhere. And I will be finishing up my interview with Jim Mars in the final 2 segments. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Codex Alimentarius. They're trying now to outlaw vitamins, okay? In fact, let me tell you something. Vitamin C, for example. You take vitamin C and you go look on the vitamin C, and it'll say the U.S. recommended daily dosage is something like 750 milligrams, okay? And so my doctor told me on the slide one time when I was not feeling up to par, he said, take 3,000 milligrams of C in the morning, 3,000 in the evening. And I got better. Okay, so in other words, what I'm trying to tell you is that if you're taking the recommended dosage of vitamin C, it isn't doing anything for you. All right. Now, the reason they tell you that is because if they tell you to take 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C, then it will do something to you. It will help you. Oh, and that means it's a drug, and they'll have to control that. So, it's just gotten insane, and the real insanity is not so much trying to categorize the various vitamins and homeopathic remedies, but the fact that the giant pharmaceuticals corporations, all of whom trace their lineage back to the IG Farben Nazi combine, and they run the government. And they decide what we can have, what we can't have. And needless to say, if it's cheap, abundant, and effective, we can't have it. If it's expensive and hard to manufacture and cost a whole lot and produced by a giant pharmaceutical corporation, well, you can have that. That's like, are you aware that one of the pharmaceutical houses has now patented a drug that is essentially marijuana, okay? It's THC, but they've chemically mixed it around a little bit where it's not, you don't smoke it, you take it as a pill or whatever. And so picture that. So now if you want to go get a prescription and you want to alleviate your nausea and your aches and pains and stuff like that, you can take this pot pill and you're perfectly legal. But if you go and grow a little in your backyard and try to smoke it, then the cops will come and arrest you and throw you in jail. We're just an insane society, okay? Nobody, I think almost everybody, it seems to have lost the ability to think rationally and critically.
I agree. People, this is something I spotted probably, I don't know, more than 10 years ago, before I had even started to, I've researched Kennedy assassination for about 19 years, but before I really dove into the New World Order hardcore. I knew about the Illuminati and stuff, but, I hadn't dug as deep. And even before then, I kind of noticed that people were getting stupider, Jim. Just, I started to open my eyes and look around me, and I was like, is it me? I started to ask people I knew that I kind of respected and had some sort of semblance of intelligence. And I would say, Is it me, or is everybody around us getting dumber? And they would say, no, it's like everybody's getting dumber.
I think they really are. It's absolutely amazing. I don't even know. I guess it's a combination of things, but television, I think, is the key culprit. If you sit and watch television more than 30 minutes or an hour a day, then, before long, you're going to be brain dead. You just won't be able to think.
I agree. That's why,
except in the terms that they lay out for you. That's why everybody is living in. I think everybody knows the movie The Matrix with Keanu Reeves, where he takes the blue pill or the red pill, and he either finds out what's really going on, or he keeps living in this little computer-generated fantasy world. Well, of course, obviously, we're not all physically attached to computers, but we are surrounded by an electromagnetic matrix woven about us by the electronic media, okay? So if you sit and watch television all day, you're living in la-la land.
Yeah, and they've even proven that it turns your brain into the alpha state or whatever, where you're just pretty much sitting there and you're susceptible to anything that comes out of it, and you're just downloading information basically like a hard drive, and they're filling you with whatever they want to fill you with.
Exactly. And that's why when I try to have some intelligent discourse with people, all too often all I'm met with is just parroted quotes from Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity or any one of these people on all sides of the spectrum. It's just whoever you want to listen to, that's who builds up your whole worldview. It's time we start fighting back. Turn off the TV, think for yourself, do some reading, and look around. Don't just read liberal publications, read some conservative ones. Don't just read conservative, read some liberal publications. Start thinking for yourself and quit falling into this game of divide and conquer by falling into this liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican. Hey, in November, it looks like we're going to get to vote for Obama. Okay?
Yeah, you're going to get it. Goldman Sachs.
You get the same thing either way. You vote for Obama, you vote for Romney, it doesn't matter. Now, there is one person who might matter that could actually change things, and that's Ron Paul. But, of course, he's what they used to call in the old Soviet Union a non-person, which means that the government establishment has deemed him unfit for office, so he can't win, and he's a nut, and he doesn't know anything, and we'll just ignore him. Okay? It's absolutely incredible. The links to which the Republican Party leaders have gone to shut Ron Paul out of even the discussion, much less the votes. But now, you know what? He's actually got a lot of, contrary to the media, he has not dropped out. He simply stopped campaigning in the states that have already had their primaries because he said, we don't have the money to keep doing that. So that's a whole different thing. He has not dropped out. And I suspect that when it gets to the Republican National Committee convention, they're going to find he's got enough delegates there to throw it into an open convention, which means, if nothing else, maybe we'll get to hear some debate about the true issues and not the dog and pony show that they pull in the corporate media just to keep us distracted and arguing over nitpicky details. So it'll be interesting to watch. But as long as we fall for that game and that worldview, then nothing's going to change. Because if we get another Obama in there, the rhetoric may change, the visuals will change, but the basic policy will continue.
I agree. It's about the agenda. It's not really about the person that they put up. It's about their overall agenda. I mean, they're all related by blood anyway. Doesn't anybody find that odd that Cheney, Obama, Bush, they're all related?
I know.
Don't pay that any mind, though.
No, don't mind the man behind the curtain. Yeah, it's amazing. It's the same this disconnect that we have between people who want to support the troops and yet don't want to support the policy. And they don't understand, but people don't understand the disconnect. If you argue with the policy, then too many people say, well, you're against our troops. No, I honor our troops, and I think most everyone does, except for a few nutballs. The problem is, who's the policy? Whose policy is it? And who's being affected by it? So we need to start thinking for ourselves, and we need to separate loyalty to the troops from loyalty for the policy.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big thing, Jim. A lot of times, and I get that as a veteran, I've been told, you of all people should respect the troops, and I do. I've done shows covering veterans issues. I've played stuff from Iraq veterans against the war. I did 2 shows where I devoted it to their testimonies to get it out on air. I love veterans. I love the men and women that serve this country. I understand myself from going through it myself, what they've been through, and I love them and respect them enough that I don't want to see them go to foreign countries for lies and get killed for nothing when they shouldn't be. We should respect them more than that.
Exactly. And if people say, well.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the final break of this Sunday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. When we come back, I will play the final few minutes of the interview with Jim Marrs, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with tonight's final segment. And before I finish playing the interview, I want to remind you now, remember I said the first hour in the beginning of the show that the reason I wanted to get the interview played because there were certain things that, due to the fact that Jim and I mentioned Ron Paul specifically and what was going on at that moment in time, I needed to get it out fast because of what's going on now. No one knows. Now, again, this interview was recorded almost 2 weeks ago, so it would be interesting for me to be able to get in touch with Jim now, and I'll have to try to email him and get a hold of him and see what he thinks, what his take is right now. But honestly, all of this is still fresh, so it's still ongoing. It's still occurring. So perhaps I should wait a few, maybe another week or so, and let some more breaking things come out before I get Jim's opinion on it. But I will seek to get in touch with Jim and get his opinion on what's been going on as of late. But I know it sounded a little weird when he was talking about, well, Ron's not out of the race yet. He was talking about a couple weeks ago when they were saying, he's going to drop out of the race, blah, blah, blah. Mitt Romney has secured the... he's gonna be the presumptive nominee. The GOP is gonna pick him. Blah 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 blah. So that's what Jim was talking about. And again, because I've had other guests lined up and everything else, I didn't get a chance to air the interview until today. And I know it sounded a little odd, but I addressed that the first hour. And I know there's some people that might have tuned in and didn't hear it. They tuned in later on during the first hour and the beginning of the second hour, and they didn't hear me say that. So if you're wondering if he was talking about what's going on now, no, he was not. And I am interested in getting Jim's perspective on that. But let me finish playing the last few minutes of the interview really quick. So hang on. Let me just cue this up for you guys so you can hear the last few minutes of the interview.
Don't you want to protect our troops? Well, yes, I do. That's why I say get them the hell home. Okay, there's no reason they should be over in some foreign country, fighting for an oil company, or defending the poppy fields. And again, hey, I'm a veteran too. I served my time in the U.S. Army during Vietnam, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for anyone who would don the uniform and serve the country. But that's one thing. the people who have taken control of this country and the Fourth Reich that they have empire that they have put into position is just the antithesis of everything that America and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights has stood for 200 years. And it's time we start understanding that, or we're going to lose it all. It's just incredible.
I agree wholeheartedly, and a lot of this goes back to educating ourselves, because I don't think you can really put up a good fight against any of this unless you really know what's going on. And that includes going back and looking at stuff that dates back, 5,000 years ago. I get questioned a lot when people say to me, why do you cover, because on my show I cover a huge array of different things. And people will say when I bring up the ancient alien stuff or the Sumerian text and stuff, I'll get, well, why do I have to focus on that? That was 5,000 years ago. And I'm like, well, because a lot of that correlates to what these people today that are in charge believe. And if you don't understand what they believe, you don't have a chance of even understanding the level of things that they will do and the level that they'll go to see their agenda through.
That's exactly right. You said it just perfectly. Well, I appreciate the time to be with you, and I hope that leaves it on a note of actually somewhat optimistic, because keep in mind there's more of us than there are of them, and we're getting smarter all the time. We just need to wake up and start thinking for ourselves.
I agree, Jim. Really quick, go ahead and plug your website and any of your books and anything else you want to plug really quick. Go ahead.
Okay. Be sure and visit my website, jimmars.com. That's Jim Mars with 2 R's, MARRS.com. And my books are available at any bookstore or, of course, Amazon. Or actually, you can order them off my website, and you might get a view of all the ones that I have produced to date. And I appreciate everyone who's listening, because that shows at least you're paying attention and you're thinking about these things. And I leave with my final admonition, which is, hey, don't trust me, okay? I'm not a preacher and I'm not a politician, so I'm not asking for your trust or even your belief. But listen to what I'm saying. Go research it for yourself, like Popeye has, and then you'll find out what's true and what's not, and it won't be a question of who you believe. It'll be a question of, I know this.
I agree. Well said, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. It is an honor to be able to sit and talk to you, and you're welcome back anytime.
Okay, well, thanks a bunch.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope that inspires you to go do a little research. Hope that go check out his book, Rise of the Fourth Reich. And what he's talking about when he's talking about the rise of the Fourth Reich, he's not talking about a secret Nazi faction. He's talking about Reich meaning the term empire and what we have today. And he explains how they took these Nazi scientists over here, they meaning the CIA at the time, and they imported these Nazi scientists and stuff over here and took from them their knowledge and a lot of their capabilities and other things, and some of their ideology, that fascist ideology, and that's what the United States has been transformed into today. And then, of course, you have, and I don't mean Nazi. See, a lot of people get mad when you say Nazi, because they assume that you're, which some people do. They think they overuse the term, and that's because they're just describing the Nazi Party. But honestly, fascism, which is what National Socialism was, you have fascism, communism. They're all the same thing, both of them. Okay, corporatism, what we have today in this country, it's all the same thing. It's all Illuminism. Illuminati writings, if that's what you want to call it. The writings of Adam Weishaupt, communism, the Communist Manifesto, based off of Karl Marx didn't write it again. Go read None Dare Call It Conspiracy. Gary Allen talked about this 50 years ago. And in that book, you'll see him say, the people that want to say, it's all the Jews, that's a red herring just like any of the other crap. Because it's not just any one group of individuals. This is too large of a thing for any one group of individuals to be undertaking, okay? This goes back a very, very, very long time. A very long time. And there's a lot of different aspects to it. So don't just think that, at least when I refer to, if you hear me say, oh, that's Nazi-esque or something, I'm referring more to the fascist side of it. And you know what? I'm going to try to make an effort to not say Nazi as much and to say fascist, because blaming the Nazis would be like, well, that'd be like blaming the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and I know better than that. It's not a party thing. It's not a political thing. It's fascism. Doesn't matter what kind of face you put on it. Doesn't matter, what dictator you put on it, whether he's a brutal dictator or a benevolent one. It does not matter. Fascism is fascism. Communism is all based off the same things. It's all, when you look at it, it's the basic same thing. The state controls everything, and you have no control over anything. You have to do what you're told. And there's always secret police involved and prison camps. So it's all the same basic ideology. And a lot of times I think people get too, it's, you said Nazi or you said communism. You should have said more like, instead of, the Nazis, you should have referred to, the Russians under Stalin, which is true too. They were just as brutal. Actually, they were worse. Russians were bigger monsters, under Stalin. Stalin was a monster. But at the time, that's not what history teaches you. It teaches you that he was Uncle Joe. So again, there's a lot of different paths. There's a lot of different things, or branches, I should say. I think you should investigate every one of them, but don't just think that it's one individual group of people. It's a conglomerate of individuals from across different societies in the world that are coming together to create this. And honestly, nobody knows the names of the people at the top of the pyramid. Let's be honest with ourselves. Does anybody know who sits on the Committee of 300, the Club of Rome? No. Some people maybe, but do you know every member? Do you know the people that sit on the round table groups above them that give them marching orders? No, we really don't know the names. I'm sure it's all related to the same blood lineages, though, one way or another. All these scumbags play their part.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. All these scumbags do play their part. And with that, that is the end of that broadcast from June 10th, 2012. My very first interview with Jim Mars. Fair winds and following seas, my brother. I will see you again one day on the other side, and we will share a cold brew at Valhalla's bar. If anything, Jim knows by now all the secrets that there is to know, ladies and gentlemen. So he finally did get his proof positive as to who killed Kennedy and what the real agenda is and how it's all going to play out. Jim knows. Anyway, we are out of time, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to this broadcast again, taking the time to honor Mr. Jim Mars, legend himself. Go check out all of Jim's books. Read all of them. You don't have to agree with everything Jim ever wrote or talked about or said. But if you even pick up 10% of what he talked about and take that and start doing further research into it, reality, what you think is reality, your current reality will change. I promise you. If you would like to download a copy of None Dare Call It Conspiracy for free, you can go to federaljack.com/ebooks, federaljack.com/EBOOKS, and it'll be in there. It should be right in the first directory listing, but in that directory listing there's sub-listings because there's folders and stuff in there. But you should see all the books. Take some time, go through it, download everything in there. We're constantly getting DMCA requests to take stuff down, and when we get them, we legally have to take the stuff down. So you never know. grab it while it's there. That's what that download section is for. Go over to federaljack.com and look at the rest of the downloads in the download section. And, of course, popeyeradio.com, and you can download all of the audio for all of the shows there. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in and listening to this interview in honor of Jim Mars, and I will see you all again soon. And as I tell you every time I sign off, ladies and gentlemen, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. Go out and be the heroes I know all of you are. Go out and be the change. I love you all. I'll see you all again soon.